Across cultures, girls are often blamed for the way they dress. From school dress codes to courtrooms and online spaces, a girl's outfit is regularly seen not as self-expression, but as a cause for distraction or even misconduct. Instead of questioning harmful behavior, society turns its focus on women's clothing, implying that what they wear invites judgment or violence. This pattern is not new. It stems from deep-rooted beliefs about modesty, gender roles, and control over women's bodies. These ideas are reinforced by media, religion, and outdated rules that shift responsibility away from the perpetrators. This essay explores why girls are repeatedly blamed for their appearance. Through history, culture, media, law, and psychology, we'll uncover how this mindset developed and why it must change. 1. The roots of a double standard. Throughout history, what women wear has been treated not just as fashion, but as a reflection of their morality. In nearly every era, from ancient civilizations to modern-day societies, the scrutiny of women's clothing has been less about aesthetics and more about control. In cultures across time, modesty in dress has been portrayed as the gold standard of female virtue, linking fabric length to personal worth. The logic is flawed, but the legacy runs deep. Society has repeatedly dictated that a good woman must dress in a way that ensures the comfort of others, especially men. And in doing so, it puts women in a never-ending balancing act, expected to be attractive, but not too attractive, confident, but not attention-seeking. It's like walking a tightrope in high heels, and the slightest misstep invites judgment. Meanwhile, men are rarely placed under the same microscope. Their clothing is seen as neutral, practical, or even empowering, regardless of how much skin is shown. This difference reveals a double standard so normalized that many don't even question it. As the idiom goes, one rule for the rich and another for the poor. Only here, it's one rule for women and another for men. This double standard teaches girls from a young age that their bodies are distractions and liabilities rather than simply their own. And that burden, passed down through generations, creates a world where women are expected to modify themselves not to feel safe, but to avoid making others uncomfortable. It's a silent message stitched into every hemline and neckline. Your body is a problem you must constantly manage. Until we confront the roots of this mindset, we'll keep asking the wrong question, blaming women not for what they've done, but for what they wear. 2. Clothing as a weapon and victim blaming. The act of victim blaming is most insidious when it comes to sexual assault cases, where survivors are often asked not, "What happened to you?" but "What were you wearing?" This dangerous question shifts the blame from the perpetrator's actions to the victim's outfit, as if a woman's clothing could somehow signal consent. The saying, "blaming the umbrella for the rain," perfectly captures this absurd logic. It's misplaced, harmful, and profoundly unjust. Clothes don't cause assault, people do. For example, a 2018 rape trial in Ireland made international headlines when the defense lawyer held up the teenage victim's thong as evidence of consent, arguing that her lingerie was proof that she was willing. This defense sparked a massive backlash, with thousands of women sharing photos of their own underwear under the hashtag, "This is not consent." The message was clear. Clothing is not an invitation for violence, but the damage was done. This case exemplified how clothing can be weaponized in courtrooms, putting the responsibility for assault squarely on the victim's attire rather than the perpetrator's actions. This phenomenon is not limited to one instance. In India, a judge once reduced a rapist's sentence by arguing that the victim's provocative clothing contributed to the crime. Here, the judicial system itself perpetuated the idea that a woman's fashion choices could justify or mitigate violent behavior. Such statements serve to invalidate the victim's experience and enable the perpetrator's actions to go unpunished. By focusing on what a woman wears instead of what a man does, society continues to distract from the real issue, the need to hold perpetrators accountable for their violence. Until we begin to untangle this toxic narrative, where a woman's clothes are seen as an excuse for assault, we will continue to reinforce a culture of silence and shame. It's like barking up the wrong tree. blaming an innocent factor instead of addressing the root cause of questionable violence and disregard for personal boundaries. 3. Media, the mirror with a crooked reflection. Media representation fuels and amplifies this blame game. Television, film, music videos, and social platforms often depict women in hypersexualized ways, then criticize them for it. It's a mixed message that tells girls, be sexy, but not too sexy. Be confident, but not revealing. When female celebrities wear bold or revealing outfits, they are labeled attention seekers or asking for it. When male celebrities do the same, they're called edgy or rebellious. That's a double standard hiding in plain sight. Consider the 2021 backlash against singer Billie Eilish, who transitioned from wearing baggy clothes to more form-fitting attire as she came of age. Suddenly, the media shifted its tone from admiring her anti-sexualization stance to accusing her of selling out. She summed it up perfectly in an interview. "If I wear what is comfortable, I'm not a woman. If I shed the layers, I'm a slut. Though you've never seen my body, you still judge it." The media holds a funhouse mirror to girls, one that warps their reflection and blames them for it. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation and idiom that perfectly captures the no-win reality many women face when choosing their outfits. Whether covered or exposed, they're walking a societal tightrope. 4. Cultural conservatism versus female expression. Across various societies, clothing has long been intertwined with cultural norms, often serving as a reflection of broader values like modesty, morality, and respect for tradition. For women, these values are amplified, with attire becoming a public symbol of family honor, religious devotion, or national identity. In many conservative cultures, the pressure to adhere to strict dress codes is immense. A woman's choice of clothing isn't just a personal preference. It's perceived as a direct reflection of her family, community, and even the nation's values. The saying, "clothes maketh the man," underscores the role of clothing in defining one's character. But in the case of women, the saying often takes on a more oppressive tone. When women dress according to societal expectations, they are seen as upholding family honor or embodying moral virtue. However, the moment they deviate from these norms, they are often labeled as immoral or rebellious, exposing a double standard in how men and women are treated. The key issue lies in the way modesty is manipulated from an empowering personal choice to a tool of societal control. Modesty, when embraced freely, can be empowering and a source of personal pride. However, when it is imposed as a mandatory expectation, it becomes a form of cultural policing. The pressure to conform to specific standards of dress can create an environment where women are judged not for their actions, but for their perceived ability to uphold these societal standards. Deviating from the prescribed attire becomes an act of defiance, often met with social ostracism, criticism, or even violence. As the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. Yet in many cultures, women's clothing is often seen as the entire narrative, reducing their entire worth to how they dress. The conversation around women's clothing must shift from a question of control to a discussion of empowerment or choice. Not compulsion is at the heart of every woman's right to express herself. Until then, the clash between cultural conservatism and female expression will continue to remain unresolved. 5. The psychology of policing girls. The quickness with which society blames girls for their clothing choices may be rooted in a psychological phenomenon known as benevolent sexism. At first glance, this form of sexism might appear to be protective, but in reality, it is deeply harmful. Benevolent sexism frames women as needing constant shielding from the dangers of the world, reinforcing the idea that their value lies in their vulnerability and purity. This mindset often justifies controlling women, and clothing becomes a convenient tool for enforcing these ideals. Parents, schools, and society often impose restrictions on girls' clothing with the argument that it is for their own protection. The message, however, is not about safeguarding them from danger, but about subtly shifting the responsibility for that danger onto the girls themselves. The idea that a girl's clothing could invite harm is similar to telling someone not to go outside during a thunderstorm without acknowledging the true cause of the storm. By blaming girls for the potential consequences of their attire, society deflects attention from the real issue, the behaviors and attitudes that perpetuate harm in the first place. From an early age, girls are conditioned to associate their clothing choices with moral judgment. Psychological studies have shown that children as young as 7 can internalize the idea that how they dress directly correlates with their worth and behavior. This kind of conditioning, much like planting a seed in fertile soil, sets the stage for a lifetime of self-policing. The saying, "as you sow, so shall you reap," perfectly captures this cycle. When society sows shame and judgment around clothing, it reaps a generation of girls who are afraid to express themselves, bound by invisible rules that dictate their every move. By reinforcing these patterns of thinking, society not only diminishes a girl's autonomy, but also perpetuates harmful stereotypes about women's behavior. This insidious psychology lays the groundwork for a culture that holds women accountable for things they have no control over. Until we address the root of this problem, girls will continue to be trapped in a cycle where their clothing is scrutinized, judged, and blamed for problems that are not of their making. 6. When boys will be boys becomes the excuse. The idea that girls must bear the brunt of responsibility for controlling boys' behavior is an ingrained and dangerous mentality. The phrase "boys will be boys" has long been used as a justification for male misbehavior, trivializing their actions and excusing everything from harassment to unwanted attention. It frames male impulses as natural and uncontrollable, leaving girls to bear the burden of managing these impulses by altering their appearance and behavior. This flawed mindset is not only harmful to girls, but also enables boys to avoid taking accountability for their actions. The common assumption is that boys, by virtue of their nature, are incapable of controlling themselves, while girls are expected to modify their behavior and dress accordingly. This reflects a larger societal issue. It teaches boys that their behavior is excusable and that girls must accommodate, or even suppress their identities to avoid attracting attention. As the idiom goes, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Society's intent to protect girls is misguided because it fails to address the root of the problem, the lack of responsibility placed on boys. This type of reasoning creates a dangerous precedent. If boys are never held accountable for their actions, then who is? Girls are expected to conform to the status quo, but this only reinforces a cycle of inequality. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Society cannot expect girls to hide themselves in the name of protecting boys' behavior, while simultaneously allowing those boys to misbehave unchecked. This isn't education, it's indoctrination into a system where the roles are stacked against girls and their right to express themselves freely. The underlying message is clear. Girls' value is determined by their appearance, and boys' actions are excused as a result. But until we challenge this narrative and demand accountability from all parties, we perpetuate a toxic culture of victim blaming, silencing, and inequality. Girls should never be the ones to disappear to accommodate others' behaviors. It's time for a change. 7. The real cost. Shame, anxiety, and fear. When society places the blame on girls for how they dress, it doesn't just affect how they are viewed by others. It profoundly impacts how they view themselves. The constant scrutiny leads to deep-rooted body shame, a lack of self-worth, and debilitating social anxiety. Girls internalize the idea that their value is intrinsically tied to their appearance, and this distorted view can have long-lasting psychological effects. The pressure to conform to unrealistic beauty standards often leads to a vicious cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. As the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in this case, the image painted is one of fear, inadequacy, and the constant need for self-policing. This doesn't just affect girls' mental health. It limits their potential and stifles their voices. They begin to make decisions based on how they might be judged, whether it's choosing not to participate in activities, avoiding certain social situations, or even restricting their own behavior to stay safe from unwanted attention. The societal message is clear. Girls must mold themselves to avoid being seen as a distraction, the consequence. They learn to fear visibility, seeing their bodies as potential sources of shame rather than sources of strength. Don't throw stones at glass houses. As the saying goes, yet society itself is living in a glass house, constantly pointing fingers at girls for their appearance, while turning a blind eye to the structural issues that create these harmful expectations in the first place. This culture of blame and shame restricts girls' freedoms, making them feel as though their worth is contingent on conforming to others' judgments, rather than expressing themselves freely and authentically. The real cost is the emotional toll that this constant judgment takes on young girls. It's not about vanity or superficiality, but about surviving in an environment where their every move, appearance, and choice is scrutinized. Until society shifts its focus from blaming to empowering, these toxic cycles of shame, fear, and anxiety will persist. 8. Rewriting the narrative, shifting the blame. True change doesn't begin at the hemline, it begins in the mind. The impulse to blame girls for the way they dress is not only outdated, but dangerously simplistic. It reduces deeply layered societal issues, harassment, gender-based violence, and institutional sexism into something as trivial as clothing choice. In doing so, it offers a lazy and deeply flawed explanation for bad behavior. Instead of asking hard questions about consent, power, and cultural double standards, many choose the easy way out. If she hadn't worn that, this wouldn't have happened. But as the old saying goes, a bad workman always blames his tools. Blaming clothing is not just unjust. It's a distraction from the truth. Rewriting the narrative requires flipping the script. The question should never be, what was she wearing? But instead, why do we continue to accept clothing as a justification for someone else's misconduct? Shifting blame onto girls allows those empowered teachers, parents, administrators, even legal systems to avoid doing the real work of dismantling harmful norms. They hide behind so-called concern for safety or discipline, when in truth, these dress codes and expectations often mask a discomfort with female autonomy. It's a classic case of robbing Peter to pay Paul, sacrificing girls' freedom to maintain superficial control over boys' behavior. But the tide is turning. In progressive educational settings and grassroots movements, the conversation is starting to evolve. Some communities are rejecting punitive dress codes and implementing gender equality education. These programs teach consent, emotional literacy, and respect for boundaries, equipping young people with the tools to navigate relationships ethically and responsibly. As the idiom goes, the pen is mightier than the sword, and rewriting how we talk about clothing and accountability has the power to change hearts, laws, and futures. More importantly, we must teach girls that their worth is not measured by how much of their body is hidden. They are not objects to be managed or distractions to be silenced. They are full human beings with rights, voices, and choices. And society has a responsibility to make space for those choices rather than punish them. If we continue to place the burden of morality on fabric, we are sowing a culture of fear and compliance. But if we shift the narrative, we can weave something stronger, a culture rooted in trust, equity, and self-expression. 9. Conclusion. Beyond fabric, toward freedom. So, why are girls always blamed for the way they dress? The answer, sadly, lies in convenience. It's easier to point fingers at a tank top than to dismantle centuries of patriarchal control. It's easier to shame a girl into wearing a hoodie than to educate a boy on consent. But what's easy isn't always right, and what's right isn't always easy. If we want a better, fairer world, we need to stop picking the low-hanging fruit of superficial judgments and start climbing toward real change. Blaming clothing is not just a misdiagnosis. It's a symptom of a sick system. It sends the message that safety is conditional, that dignity is earned through modesty, and that harassment is inevitable unless girls protect themselves at all costs. That is not empowerment, that is oppression, dressed up as tradition. As our world progresses, so must our understanding of agency, autonomy, and the meaning of respect. Freedom of dress is not about promoting vanity, it's about honoring the basic right to exist without fear. A girl's outfit should never determine the value of her voice, the validity of her experience, or the protection of her rights. The time has come to strip away these outdated beliefs and confront the truth head-on. The clothes may be loud, but the message should be clear. It's time to stop policing girls' outfits and start policing the structures that shame them. Let's teach girls they are not at fault. Let's teach boys that they are accountable. And let's remind ourselves, again and again, that it was never about what she was wearing. It was about what we refused to change. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.